if y'all have forgotten what Whiteboard can do for you, you can just sit and listen to me explain the problems, and then you can hit that button at the top that says Copy Teacher. And then in your Whiteboard application, everything that I have written on that slide will just copy to your Whiteboard, and then you can save it. So it's a really good tool to be able to watch the teacher. Hey, Brooklyn. Watch the teacher work and listen to me work out the problem, and then you don't have to write everything down. Now, if you're a writer and you just feel better taking notes, hey, Jonica, hey, Ramel, then definitely do what you think is best. But I do think it's pretty cool to be able to use that Whiteboard link and get all the notes. Hey, Isabella, good morning. I have 5 examples. Hey, Jade. We were only 50% last Wednesday in attendance. I try to keep up with that percentage. So we were a little bit low last Wednesday. So I was hoping for more students to show today. So I already see that Isabella and Jada and Jonica have logged on to the whiteboards. I can see y'all's whiteboards right here. I like it so I can see some class participation there. Again, the whiteboard is a great way for you to get all the notes. And then you can also copy what I've written on each slide by hitting that Copy Teacher button. Hey, Tiara. Hope y'all are staying warm. It's still pretty cold down here in South Alabama. We're really not used to that. All right, I've got 9:17, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I'll try to speak to each person as they come in. But thank y'all so much for coming to small group. Today we're going to focus on section 3.07. The title of that is Combine or Combining Functions. I have 5 examples for you. Remember, in small group, we'll try to slow the topic down just a little bit and really go through how to do each problem. And I'll try to save some time at the end of class. If you have any questions at all about what you're working on today, or what you plan on working on today, or what you worked on yesterday and you had issues with, I'll save some time at the end of class so you can ask questions. So a quick reminder again, the whiteboard link is in the chat. It's a really, really good tool for you to log on to that whiteboard link. It'll open in a different tab, but you can still keep the Neuro tab open and listen to me go over the problems, and then you can hit that Copy Teacher button. Hey, Madison, and it'll copy everything that I have written down. I think all 5 of these problems have a little bit of algebra work to them. So if you like to write and do your own notes, you definitely can do that. But remember that the Whiteboard app does have that Copy Teacher option. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to my next slide. This is what our week looks like as far as our assignments. Monday was President's Day. I hope you enjoyed the day off. And Friday this week is a catch-up day. So that should mean that you don't have any assignments for any of your classes, and it gives you a day to go back and make sure that you take care of some of those overdues, some of those zeros. Always try some of your bonuses, guys. They won't ever affect your grade in a negative way. They can only help you out. This week we're ending unit, hey Alea, we're ending unit 3. We had a 3.08 review yesterday. Just a tip on your reviews. When you're doing the review, you can go back and I think you can go back and review what you missed. And if you missed something and you don't know why you missed it, that'd be a great problem for you to take a snip of and send it to me in an email, or multiple questions, and just say, Ms. Prater, I did the 3.08 review. And before I take the test, these are some questions that I missed. Could you explain them? And then I'll make a video and I'll just paste your pictures in that you sent me from the questions. And I'll just make a video answering or working out those questions. So please use email as a way to ask me questions. I beg people to do that all the time. And honestly, I have about 3 regulars that email me questions periodically throughout the week. But out of 320 students, 3 out of 320, that's not a lot of students that are emailing pictures of problems to get me to help them with it. So y'all take advantage of that. Today, you have a 3.09 unit test. You do not have the part 2. That is for Honors Algebra 2 only. You have already completed, hopefully, the only TGA you have this quarter, which was in Unit 2. There'll not be another TGA until 4th quarter, which starts March the 12th. In ROLS, OHS, whatever you want to call it, we do not have to cover Unit 4 and Unit 5. Hey, Naya. Those are not in the Algebra 2 course of study for the state of Alabama. So that's why we're jumping from Unit 3 to Unit 6. So we do not have to cover Unit 4 and Unit 5. So those are hidden from you. You should not see Unit 4 or Unit 5 in your OHS. No problem, Naya. We're glad that you're here today. The whiteboard link is right above your comment in the chat. If you would like to log on to that and save it at the end, you can have all the notes for today. Thank you so much for coming. I'm glad that you're feeling better. 11th graders, if I have any 11th graders in the room today, your confirmation emails for the ACT should have gone out already. And I will tell you, I've helped maybe 3 parents with those confirmation emails, and the RSV is almost all the way at the bottom of the email, or the ones that I've seen. I've been working with some seniors who have been asked to retake the work keys. So some parents are reading the emails and they're thinking they're confirming their ACT, or students are thinking they're confirming their ACT. But I think it's because there's some information about an identification card. Have y'all looked at your ACT confirmation email? Anybody? So Eva, can you tell me, was it kind of confusing? Was there some information about an ACT ID, and then you had to go all the way to the bottom of the email to get to where you RSVP for your testing date and testing site? So I think it's because the link is towards the bottom of the email. We're all in a hurry because life is just like that for all of us. And we're just kind of skimming through the email and we're thinking we're confirming, but we're not. So your homeroom teacher can actually go into a program that we use for testing, and we can tell who has confirmed and who has not. And then those students that have not confirmed yet, there'll be a time in the next week or so that they're going to ask homeroom teachers to make a contact with those students to say, you haven't confirmed yet. And guys, like 9 out of 10, they'll say, well, I thought I confirmed. But you've got to go all the way down to the bottom of the email where it says RSVP. And let's talk about IDs while we're on it. If you have a driver's permit, that is a proper identification card that you can use to get into the ACT. If you have a driver's license, you can use that. You do not have to have a school ID, and you do not have to have, what they call like a state ID. So if you have a driver's permit or a driver's license, that is perfect for the ACT. Any questions? If there's any 11th graders in here on identification, what you have to get into your in-person testing site. So Eva says what was confusing to her was the paper that you had to print out. Was that the digital device policy? I've not seen the ACT email yet for confirmation. So I'm not sure what that was. So that is, okay, so that piece of paper is the same. Hey, Kaylee, that piece of paper is your identification document, and you don't have to have that if you have a driver's permit or a driver's license. Yeah, it's very confusing. Okay. So if you have any questions at all, I'll be glad to try to answer those. So that's why I was saying a lot of people try to do the identification card from the ACT, which you do print it out and then you put a picture of. Yeah, you don't have to do that if you have a learner's permit or a driver's license. That's an option for someone that does not have a learner's permit. Hey, Corey. Or driver's license. Anybody else, any other 11th graders having any kind of issues at all? You know, that ACT, if you're an 11th grader, is your in-person test for the year, and it is required that you go to that. So it's important that you get it all confirmed and you know what you're doing. You're going to be anxious probably already just because you're testing. I know I get a little anxious when I test, and then you've got to get to a location. Maybe you've been to it, maybe you haven't. Teachers even get a little anxious because we have all this stuff we have to train on to give you the test to make sure we're following, you know, all the 1,027 rules that there are from ACT. Okay, good deal. All right, I'm going to move on. I have 5 examples today. And again, if you're not logged onto the whiteboard and you want to be, you can get all my work just by hitting that little button at the top that says Copy Teacher. So the reason I like to focus on this is a section I would, if I got to choose, I would always choose it as a Live Class Connect lesson because we see a lot of these problems on the ACT. They're not that difficult. What's difficult is the way that they write the problem, the notation that they use. So this problem is asking you what is, I'm going to put it in a box so we can focus on it. What is, and then in parentheses, it has F plus G. And then in another parentheses, it has X. So all it's telling you is to take function F, which is this function. This is your F of X function, and add it to your G of X function. And we actually did this before Christmas. We just didn't use this notation. So this is what it would look like. We're going to take 2x squared plus 3x, and I like to keep these in parentheses in my first step. And we're going to add it to parentheses 5x squared minus 2x minus 6. So because this problem says F plus G, it's telling us we're going to add those two functions. So we're going to add what F of X is equal to with what G of X is equal to. Okay, once you understand that, that's our first step, is to write it as an addition problem. In our second step, if we are adding, we have the right mathematically to drop the parentheses and bring down each term exactly like it is. So that means we're going to drop the parentheses and bring down 2x squared, drop the parentheses and bring down plus 3x. This 5x squared is an understood positive because there's not a negative in front of it. So drop this parentheses, bring down positive 5x squared, bring down negative 2x, and bring down minus 6. As long as you're adding, you're going to drop the parentheses and bring everything down with the sign in front of it that it had to begin with. Hey, Kendall, we're glad that you're here. The whiteboard link is in the chat. Then, since we're adding or subtracting, our rule is to combine like terms. So we're going to look for anything that has an x squared first. So I have 2 terms that have an x squared. I'm going to combine those in my third step. So 2x squared and 5x squared are going to combine to be 7x squared. And then, guys, I can remember this like it was yesterday. My 9th grade Algebra 1 teacher, Miss Haynes, she always underlined like terms with the same number of lines. So she always taught me how to put 1 line under my x squareds, 2 lines under my x's. So that's 3x and a negative 2x. That's going to combine to be positive 1x. And then this little minus 6, it doesn't have a like term. So you just bring it down. And then that's going to be your final answer. You probably won't see the 1. You'll probably just see it as a plus x, but it would be okay that you put a 1 there if you wanted to. All right, any questions about adding functions? I have adding, I have subtracting, I have multiplying, I have dividing, and then I have one word problem to show you today from this section. I'm going to move on to number 2. If you have a question, you can put it in the chat. You can hop on the mic. You can raise your hand. All right, and number 2, they're going to ask us to find, let's look at this. In the first parentheses, it says f subtract g. And then in the second parentheses, it has x. So that means we're going to take f of x, which is this, and I'm going to put it in parentheses. And then we're going to take g of x, which is this, and we're going to subtract g of x from f of x. I have had so many students specifically come out of the ACT and they'll try to show me a problem that was on there and they'll say, Ms. Prater, I didn't have any idea how to do that. And they think that this is calculus. They actually think this is something that they've never learned before, but it's algebra 2. It's something that we learn in algebra 2, and it's just telling you to take these two functions and subtract. Okay? When we are subtracting, we are allowed to drop the first set of parentheses, bring down the terms just like they are. But does anybody remember what we have to do with the second parentheses? What do we have to do with this second parentheses since we're subtracting? So this is a rule specifically for subtracting. Does anybody remember what's going to happen to everything in that second parentheses? The 5x squared, the minus 2x, the minus 6, because we're subtracting. Anybody remember that? Guessing is awesome. Anything that means your brain is like, we are going to add. Some of them we are going to add. But what is this subtraction sign going to do to all three of these terms? We could possibly be adding or subtracting, but what does this subtraction do to all three of these terms in the parentheses that we're subtracting? Anybody remember? So you can think of it as two different ways. You can think of it as I'm subtracting 5x squared and I'm subtracting negative 2x and I'm subtracting negative 6. Or you can think of it as multiplying by negative 1. And I like to multiply. I feel like I'm better at multiplying than I am at subtracting. So I like to multiply by negative 1. So I'm going to do negative 1 times positive 5x squared. That's going to give me negative 5x squared. And then negative 1 times negative 2x, that's going to give me a positive 2x. And then a negative 1 times a negative 6 is going to give me a positive 6. So let me take a different color and let me circle these signs. And you tell me what's happened to all three signs. Can you tell me from step 1 to step 2? What's happening to the sign in front of the 5x squared, the 2x, and the negative 6? What's happening from step 1 to step 2? Anybody know? The positive 5x squared turned into a negative, and the negative 2x turned into a positive, and the minus 6 turned into a plus 6. So all three of these signs, because we were subtracting, changed. Okay, and a lot of times we forget that step. All right, in our third step, we're going to collect our like terms. So I have a 2x squared minus a 5x squared. This time we're not adding those together because the 5x is negative. That's going to give me a negative 3x squared. And then we have a positive 3x and a positive 2x. That's going to combine to be positive 5x. And then we have this little positive 6 that stands by itself. So we come down here and drop it down. And then that's our final answer because we can't combine an x squared and a 6 together. So we have to leave that as 3 individual terms. So this time we're subtracting. And we know we're subtracting because it's got f minus g. Any questions about number 2? I do think we're all guilty of making things harder than they are. Not that this is an easy question, but sometimes we just have this mindset that's like, oh my gosh, this is going to be awful. I'm guilty. especially with word problems. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to read through all that. I have a horrible attitude with word problems. I feel like it's one of my teacher's faults that just decided not to do any word problems in my Algebra 1. She was a great teacher otherwise. She just said, oh, we're not going to do any word problems this year. And I didn't do any word problems in Algebra 1. I think that affected me through some of my other classes. Okay, number 3. Stay on track, Miss Prater. All right, number 3, they're asking us what is, and then this time it has parentheses FG, no plus, no minus in between the letters, and then parentheses X. So when you have two variables that are pushed next to each other, does anybody know what operation is understood to be between the F and the G? I'll give you 4 choices. Does that mean we're adding? Does that mean we're subtracting? Does that mean we're multiplying? Or does that mean that we're dividing? If we have 2 letters that are just pushed next to each other and there's no operation in between. Anybody know? Are we adding? Are we subtracting? Are we multiplying? We're dividing. Eva says multiply. Anybody else agree, disagree? All right, I'm going to agree with Eva. If 2 letters or a number and a letter are being pushed together in mathematics, that means multiply. Sometimes they actually put a little dot there. Rarely will they put the X. You know, back in 3rd and 4th grade and 5th grade, we did 3 times 4 like that. And then we got a little older, and then they started to put the dot in between. And then sometimes they put them in parentheses next to each other, but all that means multiplication. So the F and the G together means we're going to multiply. Okay, so we're going to take F of X. We're going to put that in parentheses. And then we're going to take G of X, and we're going to put that in parentheses right next to the 3x squared plus 5. And we're going to multiply these 2. Who can remember what we call a polynomial with 2 terms? If something has 2 terms, it starts with the letter B. Anybody remember? B. There you go. Eva's on it this morning. A binomial. So since I have 2 terms here and 2 terms here, we're multiplying a binomial times a binomial. And we actually have a little saying. We call this the FOIL method. Can y'all give me a yes in the chat if you have heard me talk about or heard another math teacher talk about the FOIL method? The FOIL method stands for first, outer, inner, and last. And that tells us what to multiply when we're multiplying 2 binomials together. So we'll start with our first terms. So these will be the first terms in each set of parentheses. So we have a 3x squared times an x to the 1. That's going to give us, remember when you're multiplying variables, you add their exponents. So that's going to give us 3x cubed. We're going to multiply the outside terms. Those are going to be the 2 terms on the outside. 3x squared times negative 2 is negative 6x squared. Then we're going to multiply our inside terms. 5 times x is going to give me a positive 5x. And then we're going to multiply our last terms. 5 times negative 2 is going to give us negative 10. And we have an x cubed, we have an x squared, we have an x, and we have a number without a variable. So none of these are like terms. And that's going to be how this problem ends. As long as you're adding or subtracting, you have to have like terms to combine the terms. And if you don't have like terms, you just have to leave them all separated by either a plus or a minus. All right, so number 1 was adding. Number 2 was subtracting. Number 3, the one that we're looking at, is multiplying. We're going to go through all 4 of those operations. Our next problem is going to be division. Any questions about number 3? I love how some of y'all are using your whiteboards. This is slide 5. My next slide is slide 6. And they're telling us right down here, again, let me put a box around it so we can look at what they're asking us to do. It says, what is f over g of x? So we're going to take our f. And what I do is I just make it look just like the problem. I do a fraction bar. I don't use parentheses here because we're not, this one's going to be different. So I take my F and I put it in the top because F is in the top. And then I take my G and I put it in the bottom. Okay. And just like any fraction, so if we can think back to 4th, 5th, 6th grade, just like any fraction. So if you had something like, I don't know, 4/10, we always have to check to see if our fraction will reduce or simplify. So we can't leave our answer as 4/10 because we can divide the top and the bottom by 2, and we would have to reduce that out to 2/5. So the same thing's going to happen even if we have variables. We have to check to see if our fraction will simplify or reduce. So we do that by factoring. So to me, this is probably the hardest problem out of the 5 because factoring is always a pretty hard skill for most math students. So our top will factor. It is a 1, 2. It has 3 terms. Anybody remember the name for a polynomial that has 3 terms? Starts with the letter T. Polynomial with 3 terms. We've already talked about a polynomial with 2 terms being a binomial. There we go, Elijah, good job. Trinomial. So the reason I need you to know that is anytime you have 3 terms, anytime you have a trinomial, there's a really good chance that that trinomial is going to factor into 2 binomials. So it's going to have 2 binomials that multiply back together to get this trinomial. Since the 3 is negative, that tells me that my signs are different. So I put in a plus and a minus. You look at the first term, it's 2x squared, and you think of 2 things that will multiply to be 2x squared. That's going to be 2x and x. And then you have to put in 2 things that multiply to be the -3. So I'm going to use a +1 and a -3. You'll multiply those back either over to the side or in your head, and you've got to make sure that these 2 factors multiply back to get this trinomial. That's a pretty hard thing to do. On the bottom, we can factor using a GCF. Does anybody know what's the GCF between the 2x squared and the x? Anybody know what the GCF is? What's the greatest common factor between 2x squared and x? Sometimes GCF's a little bit easier than factoring a trinomial. What do both of these terms have in common? Greatest common factor. Just look at them. Can you just look and see what they have in common? Eva's got it. They have an x. So we can actually factor out an x. So we're going to say x times 2x gives me the 2x squared, and then x times +1 gives me the x. Okay, in my next step, in my third step, I can see that I have a 2x plus 1 in the top and a 2x plus 1 in the bottom. When that happens, then that's how we reduce or simplify, just like we divided this 4th grade fraction by 2 on the top and the bottom. We're actually dividing the top by 2x plus 1 and the bottom by 2x plus 1 when we cancel that. And we're left with x minus 3 over x. And then that would be our final answer. So if I had to say what I thought was hardest out of add, subtract, multiply, and divide, I would probably say divide. Dividing is probably the hardest because you have to usually factor in order to get your fraction to reduce or simplify. Any questions at all? How did I get step 1? How did I get step 2? How did I get step 3? All right, got one more example, and it is a lovely word problem. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go through this word problem. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't like word problems. Give me anything other than a word problem, and I'll be much happier, but it is what it is. They're going to give them to us. They're not going to stop giving them to us. So this says George opened a new store and he is monitoring its success closely. So quick little side note, I have kind of always wanted to open a bakery. and a coffee shop, something really, really tiny, maybe like bagels and cookies and just something like that. Some type of sweet and then coffee, but I don't think it's going to happen. Maybe I can work in a coffee shop someday. Anyway, George has opened a new store. It doesn't give us any information. It doesn't tell us what kind of store it is. So the word problem is really boring to me, but I'm going to keep reading. He has found that this store's revenue each month can be modeled by this R of X equals X squared plus 5X plus 14, where X represents the number of months since the store opens. R of X is measured in hundreds of dollars. So we'll stop for just a minute. We'll do a little economics lesson. My husband is a history teacher. He loves to teach government and economics. He likes to watch the stock market. He likes to play it just a little bit because we don't have a lot of money, but he likes to research stock, figure out what's trending, what's going up, and all that kind of stuff. But a business has revenue. Every type of business, a store, an online store has revenue. Do y'all know, does anybody know what revenue means? When we're talking about a business, a store, a shop. Revenue is the money coming in to the store. So if we pretend George has a coffee shop, a bagel and a coffee shop, it would be the money coming in from the sale of the bagels and the coffee. So the revenue would be the money coming in. Okay. Let's go on to the next part. It says that George has also found that his expenses each month can be modeled by the equation C of X equals X squared minus 3X plus 4, where X represents the number of months and C of X equals the measure of hundreds of dollars. So if we want to go in business, we do have to think about our expenses. We have to keep those expenses down as much as we can, because what do we want to do if we have a business? What's the goal? What's one of the main goals of having a business? Why would we want to have a business? To make money, okay? Unless we just got plenty of money and we don't have anything else to do, and that's not me for sure. But yeah, we want to make money, okay? So we want to make sure that our expenses are less than our revenue, okay? We want to bring in more money than we have to pay out. So expense would be things we have to pay for. What would be some things that we have to pay for if we owned a bagel and a coffee shop? What would be some of the expenses? I know y'all can think about this. This isn't math. Supplies, okay. Bills like what, Elijah? I think I know what you're talking about, but you tell me. We'd have to have the flour and everything to make the bagels. We'd have to have the coffee, the utility bills. So we'd have to be able to pay for the electricity. We'd have to pay for garbage pickup. We'd have to pay for water. I bet we would have to have some type of insurance. We would have to pay taxes. We'd have to have a business license. Okay, you can't just decide you're just going to open a business. You got to give some of that money back to the town. So there's all types of expenses. So you would want to keep your expenses low so we could actually make what we call a profit. Okay, make money. All right, here we go. So here's where the math part comes in. It says, what does R subtract C of 3 mean about George's store? So this is how I would work the problem. I think it's easier to go ahead and find R of 3. So let's find R of 3, and I'll show you how to do that. You're going to go into your R equation, which is right here. Wherever you see an X, you're going to put in a 3. So this says X squared, so I'm going to do 3 squared plus 5X. That's going to be 5 times 3 plus 14. This is going to be 9 because that's 3 squared. This is going to be 15. And this is going to be 14. So we're adding 9 plus 15 plus 14. I should be able to do that in my head, but Guys, my head is sometimes not in a good spot. So 9 plus 15 plus 14 is 38. Now, that's what R of 3 is. Now, who remembers somewhere in the problem, I'll just try to help you out here. What does it say R of X is equal to? What does it say R of X is equal to? Hint, hint. It's right here. R of X is measured in what? Okay, not just dollars. Dollars is important, but it says hundreds. So R of 3, so this means 3 is months. So after 3 months, George's revenue is at $38. Man, he's been working really, really hard for 3 months, and he's only bringing in $38. No, he's bringing in $3,800 because it says right here, R of X measures in hundreds of dollars. So his revenue, we can put a little dollar sign. He's after 3 months. That's what the X means is months. After 3 months, George is bringing in $3,800. So that means those customers, we made up that it was a bagel in a coffee shop, but they're buying enough bagels and enough coffee from his shop that he's bringing in $3,800. Okay. Now let's do C of 3. So let's do C, which are his expenses after 3 months. So we're going to plug into this equation, the C of X equation. So wherever we see an X, we're going to plug in a 3. So we got X squared. So we have 3 squared minus 3 times X. So minus 3 times 3 plus 4. So 3 squared is going to give me 9. 3 times 3 is going to give me 9. This is going to be 9 minus 9. So those 9s are going to cancel. And then we have plus 4. So after 3 months, is his utility bill and his taxes and his supplies going to cost $4? Well, right here it says that C of X is measured in hundreds of dollars. So what does this 4 really represent? Not $4, but what? 400. Okay. So his revenue, he's bringing in $3,800 from his business, and his cost, his supplies, his electricity, his taxes, his utilities is $400. So let's read the statements here. It says the new store will have a profit. Okay, that's not revenue. Okay. So every one of these is talking about, well, several of them are talking about profit. How do we find profit from revenue and cost? What do you think? Mathematically, revenue is the money we bring in. Cost is the money that goes out. Elijah's got it. We subtract. Okay. And that's what this little subtraction was trying to tell you. When you find profit, you've got to subtract your cost from your revenue, from your money that comes in. So if we do 3,800 minus 400, we get a profit. And like we said, we want to make money if we have a store. We make a profit of $3,400. So A says the new store will have a profit of $3,400 after the 3rd month. I do think it's A, but I'm going to read all answers just to make sure. B says the new store will sell 3,400 items. No, this is not about items at all. Nothing in this problem has told me about items. It can't be B. C says the new store will have a profit of $2,400. That's there just to make sure you subtracted correctly. Okay, C is a good answer, but it's not correct. And then the last one, D says the new store will sell 24 items. Didn't say anything about the number of items. It just said X is the number of months that George has his business, and R of X and C of X is the number of dollars in hundreds. Okay, so would we be happy with doing a problem like this? Probably not. I wouldn't be. I don't like them either. I don't like cleaning toilets and changing poopy diapers either, but I do them. So sometimes we have to do things that we don't like to do. Questions about number 5? That's my last example. Does anyone need me to go back to any of the slides? This is slide 7 that I'm on right now. All right, can y'all give me a 1 over today's lesson? Hey, I got this. A 2, I'm almost there, but not quite. Or a 3, I don't understand this at all. Or you can give me some type of decimal in between those numbers. So this is part of Unit 3. This is section 3.07. I hope, just like I hope every single time you come to class, I hope you leave knowing more than you did when you came. Here are some things. If you're still confused, you can read over your notes from today. You can look over your whiteboard deck. You can rewatch the class recording. You can email me, just like I mentioned at the beginning of class. You can take pictures of problems and send them to me by email, and I'll make you a little video and send it back. You can also sign up for small group, which y'all have already done, or you could attend a live help session. All right, my last slide is just reminding you that if you have your whiteboard open, that you need to make sure that you go to menu, drop down, and do download. And then we don't have exit tickets in small groups. I only do that when we have whole groups. Thank y'all so much for coming. I'm going to hang around about 5 more minutes. If any of y'all have questions at all, if you've been having any issues, I'm going to set my timer. If you're having any issues, if you're an 11th grader and you've not been able to confirm your ACT, I'll be glad for you to share your screen and we can figure out how you can do that. If you're struggling a little bit, if you have a question about your identification for the ACT or questions about anything at all, I'm going to hang around for about 5 minutes. Y'all are free to go if you don't have any questions. I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday. And I'm glad that you came. We had a pretty good number today. I hope it's more than 50%. That's what we were last week. That was low. I think that's the lowest we've had in attendance. Thank y'all so much for coming. It didn't snow here. I was looking at my PowerPoint with the snow, but it was cold this morning and it was foggy. It almost looked like we were out at sea on a ship. My grandkids usually walk to school, but they wanted a ride this morning. It's too cold, Juju. We can't walk. It's just so cold. So my husband drove them to school. They only have to walk like 2 blocks from my house to get to their school, but they were cold. Except for the 6th grade boy, because I'm not cold. He walked. The 1st grader and the 4th grader, no, it's cold. They wear uniforms, so sometimes they don't always have super warm clothes on. Almost all the schools in South Alabama wear uniforms. I thought that was interesting when I moved here. That's not true in North Alabama. Public and private schools in South Alabama, almost all of them wear uniforms. It's always a hot topic to talk about, especially if you never had to wear school uniforms. My daughter loves them because with 4 kids, she doesn't have to worry about what each one of them want to wear. You know, they don't have to, argue about that. They have to wear their uniform. Even their shoes have to be certain colors. So even the daycares, like the 4-year-old goes to like preschool daycare, he has gray polos and navy blue bottoms, like shorts or pants. No shoestrings. Can't have shoestrings if you're 4. Have to have some type of no tie shoe. Anyhow. All right, let's see who we still have in here. We have Eva and Jade and Tiara and Madison and Nye and Corey and Kendall. Is there anything I can do to help y'all before we close out our session for today? Bye, Madison. Thank you for coming. You have a good day also. All right, guys, we've got about 30 seconds before I close out the session. Eva, Tira, Nye, Corey, Kendall, y'all have any questions? All right, guys, y'all have a great day. Thank you so much for coming.